we've had quite a fun adventure with these lives so far. Let me make sure I'm not missing a request coming in. Imogen, if you do jump in here, just sent that request in. I see a couple already. There she is. Okay. I'm going to add, confirm you want to be added, and should pop up pretty soon. Pretty excited about this one. I've actually never met this person in person. Hey!
Hey, how's it going?
It is going well. How are you? Oh, I got to adjust my camera. Way in the face there.
I'm doing great. It's great to be here.
Well, first of all, I want to let everyone know we've never met in person. This was just I had someone suggest that I should request you to come on and tell us about your most memorable animal encounter. So thank you for saying yes, sort of a cold call on that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's always nice to connect to people that are kind of, in overlapping communities. So, yeah, it's super cool. Thanks for asking.
Yes. So just kind of a quick recap that I do at the top, of course. I started this about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago now, I guess, leading into Endangered Species Day. A big part of what I do is talk about conservation and animals and wildlife, reconnecting to wildlife, and I thought it'd be fun to take a different angle that often people in my position of science communications and ambassador work tend to talk a lot about the challenges of wildlife faces, or talk about what people can do and things like that, or what the conservation work is like that our colleagues are doing. But it's also something where people who do this line of work, whether it's the research like yourself or whatever, also have these really cool stories about these encounters that I think when we see people telling those stories, it helps other humans connect to the emotional side of your experience. So that's
Right.
kind of the reason we're all here. But I also like to start off with, we all are facing this pandemic thing. It's shifted a lot of people's ways of life. For you, has all of this changed your ability to do your research or your work?
Yeah, unfortunately, 100%. So I'm currently in Newark, Delaware. I'm in the fourth year of my PhD. And currently, even though I'm in Delaware, I'm supposed to be in China right now doing lab work. So yeah, no, it has affected everything significantly. Everything's on hold for me. So I'm doing all the field work, but all of my US-based lab work is supposed to happen in Montana, and I'm supposed to be in China right now, and I'm also supposed to be in India this year. And obviously, we are not sure when that will happen.
Oh man. So
that's great.
So saying all that, I know your work and what you do, but can you briefly kind of give a synopsis to those who may not know, that are maybe my followers that don't follow you yet, but they better and they will. Can you explain the work you would be doing if you were in China, or when you were supposed to be going to India later? What is it that you do in your research?
Yeah, absolutely. So my research is focusing on the range-wide evolutionary history and contemporary or current genetic structure of snow leopards in Central Asia. So snow leopards are a big cat that ranges across 12 different countries in Central Asia. So like Russia, Mongolia, some of the stands, including like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Pakistan, as well as like the northern part of India, Nepal, and Bhutan, and a lot of their range is in China. And so despite being, awesome, there's a lot that we don't know about snow leopards, particularly their molecular ecology or their genetics. And so I am a field biologist, but I'm also a bit of a lab rat. And the work that I do is trying to take data out of the field and bringing it into the lab to address conservation questions. And so realistically, I'm trying to fill a lot of our knowledge gaps. Fortunately, it's collaborative, so I'm not the only. I'm not a one-trick pony or a one-man show, whatever metaphor.
Whatever metaphor.
Yeah, it's highly collaborative. So I'm not the only person doing this work, but my research is trying to understand like where are snow leopard populations, how many populations are there, and like how are they connected both currently as well as into the past. And that data is realistically meaningful for making conservation decisions, whether it's allocating dollars or how different countries work on their transboundary conservation efforts. And so I'm done with all the field work. I did get to do some field work last year. I was in China and in Kyrgyzstan collecting data, which for me is in the form of fecal material. So even though I work on this really cool species, I don't work with them. I just go where they were and pick up their food. And so people are either like super into that when they find out about it. They're like, yeah, no, we don't want to hear anything else about it, because you literally just like pick up cat poop. And so what I was supposed to be doing now, or what I am supposed to be doing now, is the laboratory portion of that, which is taking individual fecal samples, extracting DNA, identifying individuals, and then taking that raw data and answering some of the questions that I just mentioned.
So I know with a lot of work that I've seen done from the organization I work for, the fecal samples play such an important role for also monitoring hormones and all sorts of stuff. People are always surprised by that. Can you kind of give a distilled down version as to how does cat DNA get in cat poop?
Yeah, so the very simple way is I'm going to pretend that my glass of water is fecal material. Whenever an animal defecates, the fecal material slides through the large intestines, and as it moves through the intestines, the cells that line the intestine, the actual epithelial cells, slough off with the fecal material. And so when this fecal material lands on the ground, the outer edges of it have epithelial cells which contain DNA of the animal that left it. And so when I get into the lab, I take a scalpel. I wish I had like a cell phone because this just looks weird. But when I get into the lab, I take a scalpel and I shave off the outer edge of the fecal material, and that contains my target DNA. And so after that, then I extract it through a series of like chemical reactions and like using chaotropic methods to both like precipitate the DNA and then purify the DNA. So at the end, I'm left with liquid that does look like this, and it is hopefully snow leopard DNA. And after that, we use species-specific markers to kind of identify the genetic puzzle pieces that are in that test tube, and then identify it to, oh, it's this snow leopard, or it's this snow leopard, or oh, it's actually a red fox, or, you know, a bear, or something like that.
Okay, so I have to ask one more, because just snow leopards are so hard to find in the wild anyway.
Yes.
Now, how do you find their poo?
Right. So I feel like this is like the funny anomaly about the work that I do, because realistically, yes, you're right. You know, snow leopard biologists can go many years in their career and not see a snow leopard.
Yeah.
And the work that I'm doing is inherently non-invasive. So that doesn't ever require me to come into contact with the animal. Like I don't need to live capture it. I don't need to sedate it. Like I get everything I need from the sample itself. And so it does seem like it would be a needle in a haystack. But
especially in the environment that they live in. I mean, I look at that environment, I'm like, well, how do you do this?
Right. And so like the cool part about my job is that I do get to go into the field, and basically it's like hiking up in the mountains and looking for cat poop, right? And that sounds inherently difficult. But realistically, it's not that hard because snow leopards are incredibly predictable. So like most carnivores, you know, they mark their territory boundaries and they patrol those territory boundaries. And so like I call them like nature's emails. So they basically patrol the periphery of wherever they live, and they will leave visual and scent marks for other animals to say, hey, look, like this is my place, stay away from it. Or also like, hey, you know me, we're related, you know, this is where I live, this is where you live, like I was here a month ago. All of that can be like, you know, demarked in the magical, mysterious world of how snow leopards talk to one another through urine and feces, but also like leaving scrapes and sign. And so the way that they do leave those messages for one another is really predictable. So snow leopards, they're high elevation mountain specialists. They live above tree line in really arid, rugged environments, but they patrol their ranges along like the tops of mountain ranges. So like at the summit of a linear mountain range, and they generally will defecate or urinate along like the blunt edges of cliff faces. And so if you just like hike up towards the top of the mountain, as you're walking up the mountain, if you see anything big, if it's like a boulder that stands out or looks interesting to you, it probably is interesting to a snow leopard. And so you can just go right there. And if snow leopards are in the area, which we know because we work with local communities, like the nomadic herders that live in the mountains, they say, hey, snow leopards live here. We see a lot of snow leopard prey. You're likely to find it. And so realistically, it's a lot easier to find snow leopard poop than it is to find snow leopards, at least seeing them like in the flesh. Right.
And that plays in well too, I think, into, I mean, for me, I've had exposure to a lot of species and their behavior. And I've had the grand fortune to go out and observe or work with people like yourself to do conservation work. I don't spearhead it. I'm not the PhD person, but I then bring those stories back and share that with our audience. So it's fun to learn. For me, it's like, okay, I get it. You're collecting poop, and this is why the DNA. But then it's a question for me. It's like, okay, what is the actual process? How do you find that? What do you have to understand about that species to then have that success? And so it's cool to hear you talk about that. I know it's probably weird to anybody outside our bubble right now that this is what we're talking about, but I think it's fascinating that being able to understand, like you said, they're predictable. Okay, what are those predictions, and then where can you go? And now you're like, if you see that boulder, go for it. It's probably there. I just think that's fascinating. I love that stuff.
No, it is. And they're really charismatic in that way. I mean, So they're solitary, but with most carnivores, we assume that they are only ever around other animals when they're like mating or when the females are raising young. But there are so many studies that show how complex the social systems are amongst different carnivores and certainly amongst cats. And realistically, this is just like one part of that story. And I don't study behavior. And so I haven't worked on like a collaring study, like getting to know how individuals move and like how they tick and stuff. But the projects that I have worked on that have allowed that, it's really interesting to see just how like complex their social interactions are and how social they are. Yeah, I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, it really is. It always fascinates me, no matter the species, that's for sure. But I do want to ask you now, we've talked a lot about snow leopards.
Yeah.
So there's some anticipation that maybe that's the species, but I know you do a lot of traveling and you do a lot of work, not just with snow leopards. And even if you're going to look for snow leopards, there's other species you might come across. Right. So here's the question of the whole reason we're here. What is your most memorable animal encounter?
Do I have time for two, or should I just do one?
Well,
you're the host.
Let's do one, and if we have time, we'll throw a second one on there. How's that sound?
Okay, perfect. That's fine. If we don't have time for it, if we don't have time, I'll drop hints, and you can find it on my Instagram. So yes, I will go ahead and be predictable myself and say that the most memorable experience I have is with my study animal. So most researchers understand that when you're studying snow leopards, it's very difficult to find them. Even if your goal is to collar snow leopards, it takes a really long time. I have a colleague who that was his PhD, and I mean, just an inordinate amount of effort to go into actually catching one, let alone seeing one. But if you are going to see snow leopards, there are a couple places in the world that are a little bit easier than others. And the place that I went that is considered one of the best snow leopard habitats in all of their range is called the Valley of the Cats. That is a real name. It's called the Valley of the Cats. It is a beautiful valley on the Tibetan Plateau in Ansai, China. It's, out middle of nowhere. The base camp is at a range of 13,000 feet in elevation.
Wow.
And so it's, this as pristine and, Disney charismatic as you might expect it would be. And so on this particular day, I was at this field site for about 3 weeks, and I was told that there was a possibility that I would see a snow leopard, but honestly, I just didn't have my hopes up because just going there is beautiful. Seeing, marmots is beautiful. Seeing, domestic yak is beautiful. Seeing all these birds, every day, every scene is literally a treat. You don't have to see a snow leopard for it to be just absolutely mind-bogglingly amazing. But obviously, it's always the secret goal, and you're hoping that would be the case. And so I was there in July. And it's summer, and so it's in the mountains, it's high elevation. It gets up to 55, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, which is warm for that part of the world, but it's not as warm as we think of it, right? And so on this particular day, I woke up in July, and it had snowed. And we were very excited because what that means is that it's lower temperature, and the night before, the animals had likely hunkered down a little bit, specifically the prey animals. And we knew that in July, if females were in the area, female snow leopards had cubs, they would be out trying to hunt almost around the clock to try to get their resource needs to have enough milk to nurse their cubs. And so we went to this one area that our colleagues had seen snow leopards before. And basically the way that you're looking for snow leopards is you're either driving along a road with, your head cranked back as far as possible with binoculars, or you're set up somewhere with a spotting scope, and which is a magnified binocular, and you're looking along the mountain ridges, and you're always looking for a rock that looks like a snow leopard or something that's moving that's a snow leopard. And the cool thing about snow leopards is that they blend in. You can be watching a moving cat and she stops and all of a sudden she disappears. And so in this particular case, we're scanning the mountain ridge, and it was, blindingly bright because of the snow. And we'd been driving for 20 minutes or something. And all of a sudden someone yelled because we're driving along the road, looking up on this mountain range, and all of a sudden, cresting over the other side of the mountain, she summited and came charging down the mountain in the snow, was a female snow leopard. And she was just full on, she summited like this and then came charging downhill right at us. 500 meters away, but we had our binoculars, and we realized that she was hunting a herd of blue sheep. And she just came flying down like a professional snowboarder. Her tail, using it as a rudder. And then she disappeared for a second. And we watched the herd of blue sheep. And obviously, the whole scene was amazing, but it was just 3 seconds. And so, that's enough to just make anybody happy for a lifetime. but it wasn't even over because we sat there for about 5 minutes, just, you know, jaws dropped, and all of a sudden
nobody breathed.
no one breathed. But she, you know, she'd run down the mountain and we had not seen her. Like this open, wide mountain. I mean, there's rocks, but it's mostly exposed mountain rock covered in snow. So it's a blanket of snow. She had somehow managed to run down the whole mountain without us or the blue sheep seeing us or seeing her. And then all of a sudden there's this herd of blue sheep and she just charges up the mountain at them. And she tried to catch a blue sheep and she wasn't successful, but she tried for about 30 seconds. She was trying to move these blue sheep up against a fence to try to use it to her advantage.
Right.
And so she wasn't successful. We got to watch her do this hunt. And like the whole time I'm just like silently screaming, you know, this is like real life. This is like Nat Geo happening right here in front of my face. And then she just stopped because, you know, she was out of breath. And you know, even though it's snowing, she's still hot because like they have these double coats, you know, like they're high elevation mountain specialists. So she was really taxed, and she just like sat down in the snow and just sat there, and she turned and looked like straight at us from like 300 meters away. But she looked at us and she knew we were there and just didn't care. And she just sat there in the snow for like 10 minutes. And then she just got up and like slowly sauntered away. And that was it.
Wow.
I mean, it was just like, it was pure magic. It was amazing.
I can't imagine, especially with the fresh snow and everything. Wow.
I mean, like, yeah. I mean, you know, if you've watched Animal Planet or Discovery Channel, you see those scenes. It's just like, how are they doing that? Like, they have like cameras that are so far away, and we were far away. But like, you wonder how that happens. I just would have never expected to like see a brief moment of that myself.
well, that and the other side of it, to just kind of paint the picture of how special that moment is that you witnessed. You know, you hear stories from these Nat Geo and these Discovery videographers and filmographers that they're out there for 6 months and they get like a 4-second clip. Right. You know, that's decent. And
that was my 4th day there.
And then, and you were there for 4 days, and you're like, oh, hey, look at that, Nat Geo right there in front of my face. I mean,
and then we saw 3 more after that. Well, we saw one. We saw a second snow leopard that same day, but we were driving back to our base camp, and she had come down the mountain to drink at the river. And we rounded the corner, and she was literally standing on a rock at eye level, like about to cross the road. I was on the other side of the car, so I didn't get a good look at her. So that's why it's not like that's not the moment, that wasn't the story, because I didn't get a good look at her because she darted up. But yeah, exactly. I'm just like, I feel like I don't feel like that'll ever happen again. I feel very immensely fortunate and lucky to have been able to witness that. It'll probably never happen again. And if it never happens again, I will tell this story until I'm like 95. And
you should.
Excited. Yeah.
Yeah, you do have all the rights in the world to tell the story until you cannot tell the story anymore.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, that's amazing. That really is amazing. And I do hope anybody who's watching this really gets a sense for just how special that really is. I mean, and not only for you in the sense that you're doing all this work to study the animal in general, but just to be out there and be able to witness that kind of activity of that species that is so elusive and so challenging for people to even get a glimpse of sometimes. So that's pretty cool.
Right, it is. Yeah, it is. And the cool thing about like what you do is you obviously like see a totally different side of the animal kingdom, which is it's just 2 sides of the same coin that I feel like are so like intimately special, and being able to see that is something that is, you know, obviously it's like a huge privilege for me to be able to see that, but it's not something that like I, you know, am likely to see again because I don't have the profession that facilitates that on a regular basis. So I think it's really cool that for you, it's like the reverse, right? Where you're able to have these types of special interactions. And I would imagine that for you, like it never stops being special.
Oh, hasn't yet. Yeah, it has not stopped being special. You know, and it's one of those things where I tried very hard, I'm sure like you for your moments, never to take any of it for granted and never assume that it's always going to be this easy or always going to happen or have those opportunities. It is very special, and I appreciate it very much. So yeah, it is pretty unique.
That's cool.
We do have time for your second story because you told that one incredibly well. I really want to hear what the next one is too.
Okay, so. Yeah. Hopefully I didn't like blow through it too fast because I get excited and I talk like a million miles a minute.
Well, that's the fun part of this though, is I love seeing people get that excitement, and we step away from our normal spiels and our talks, and we just let that joy show through. So yes, please proceed, as excited as you want to be.
It also doesn't help though. So like I bought I'm working from home like all of us, but I bought a medicine ball because like my chairs were so uncomfortable, and I'm sitting on, or an exercise ball, and I'm sitting on that now. And every time I get on a meeting, I have to like remember, do not bounce like this. So like I worked really hard to not bounce, but I might. So I'm
I
excited.
would not have had any clue that you were sitting on an exercise ball. You've done a fine job of not bouncing.
So my second story is a little different. Last summer, or last May actually, it's coming up on a year, like this weekend, for Memorial Day weekend, I got invited by an actress. Her name is Ashley Michael Bell. She's the producer of a documentary called Love and Bananas, an elephant story. If you haven't watched it, I highly suggest it. It's about an elephant rescue in Thailand. But she invited me and an elephant biologist to come do some science communication work in Kenya. Regarding conservation or regarding elephant conservation, but also just conservation in general. And so we went to Old Hechida Conservancy in Kenya, and we got to have like a one-on-one interview with the rhino caretakers that take care of the last two living southern white rhinos. No, sorry, northern white rhinos.
Yeah, and amazing people, aren't they?
Oh my gosh, it was so amazing. I mean, they answered all of our questions, but the thing that was so incredibly intense was that they invited us into the enclosure with Najin and Fatu, which are the last two rhinos. And I've never seen a rhino before. I mean, I'd seen them over the day before, like on the safari. And so that's obviously beautiful and emotional and intense, but there's nothing like we got out of the van, and they just literally walk up like domestic animals because they're fed, they're used to it.
Right.
But it's like like a 3-ton tank.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I had this moment, they're just walking towards us, and we were told, okay, they're not actually friendly, or, maybe they'll let you pet them if they lie down, but obviously you have to keep your distance. And realistically, they're wild animals. If their guardian, which is a southern white rhino, decides she doesn't like you, it could, just be careful. You could die. You probably won't, but maybe. So I have that like playing over in my mind.
Oh yeah.
As they feed the rhinos, and so they put this like livestock food down on the ground, and the rhinos are standing there. We're all just like, we're bug-eyed watching these three rhinos, but they get done and they get, they're a little pushy. They love their caretakers and they want to come up and start like trying to nudge them for more food, but the caretakers are careful to not let them come too close to us.
Right.
But one of the females just kept coming closer and closer. And in like a split second, I was like 8 feet away from this northern white rhino. And I had this very visceral prey item feeling, which was, oh my God, I'm going to die.
Right.
If she wants to crush me, it wouldn't even be like a fifth of her energetic expenditure. She would just flick me and I would be like flat. And, getting to have that experience is just so incredibly humbling and awe-inspiring. And then literally getting to like put my boots into like the muddy depression of that animal, which like, their footprints are like, I can't even get them on the screen, like wider than like my chest. And my hand is like a tenth of it, made me realize just how incredibly small I am, which is, I feel like, something that humans need to have, right? Like we need to have those moments that remind us that we are not the top of the food chain. And even if you're studying something, I've got opposable thumbs, we're not the top of any type of ecosystem. And so in addition to like the emotional aspect of seeing the last two living things of an entire species, getting to see it, but also have that up close, like interaction was just something that I will absolutely never forget for a variety of reasons. Not only because it was emotional and I thought I might die, but also it was just a lot. It's just a lot. You know what I mean?
It is. Oh, I do.
Really special.
I do, and I can totally relate to that. I was fortunate enough to get out there before Sudan passed away. And so I remember we were heading out there in the truck towards where their base is, where they're kept. And it was this weird sort of like super excited to get to see these three of the last northern white rhinos, but also this real somber sort of sadness came over me at the same. It was such a weird sort of mix of this back and forth of these emotions, and then meeting them in person, same thing. That I've been around rhinos before, but again, being what these three, for when I was there too, for when you were there, represent the impact of the humans, and then what we can do to save them, and all of that, and then yes, you start to really feel that we have all this technology and all this urban stuff, but like you said, within an ecosystem, are we really, where are we with that, and the size relation and everything else?
Right. No, and I think that's something that's really important. I mean, and like we talking conservation, it's so weird because I feel like we're at this crossroads between, we have to make conservation, like it's all in crisis mode, right? So everything's like, we're reacting, we're moving against the clock. But when it comes to trying to get people excited about conservation, we have to walk that balance between making it inspiring and exciting and palatable, but also realistic, right? And certain, you know, shows or ways of communicating do better than others. And so I find that like that's one of those great examples of this is both amazing and humbling, but it's also, there's not really any way to get around the emotional aspect of it's like literally the last two of something that will ever live on the planet. And obviously it's our fault. And so like you can't, we're obviously inextricably linked to that process, but trying to find a way to like disseminate that to the public in a way that makes them feel invested is something that, you know, I work on. Obviously you do really well, but I feel like storytelling is something that's often in wildlife research. And that's why science communication is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. No, well said. Very well said. And I had no, excuse me. I had no idea you had gone out there to meet them at Opej, and you've had that opportunity. So it's really cool to hear, just because it's really something special. So thank you for sharing that. And that kind of like actually works us into the, excuse me, get all choked up about rhinos. It kind of rolls us into the last part of what I like to do with this, because I started doing this with the inspiration of Endangered Species Day was coming up. Of course, it's already passed. But what, from your perspective, from what you do, what I'd love to ask everybody before we wrap up, what would you say to someone who's not in our field, not in science, or not in, you know, in the zoo world like myself, or communications about wildlife and conservation? Someone I refer to as a regular citizen asks you, what can I do? I don't feel like I can do what you do, going out to Mongolia or going out to wherever. And I live here in the US or wherever. What can I do? What would you say or offer up to someone to kind of give them that inspiration, give them that hope, and maybe give them the activity that they can do?
Right. I feel like that's a great question. And that's something that I feel like, you know, is sorely needed in our fields. Realistically, the cool thing about my answer excites me because there's so many things that we can do, right? I mean, like, just listening to this conversation is one important thing because, and I know it's cliche, knowledge is power. And the more we know, the more we have the opportunity to do something or start something. And when it comes to conservation of like wildlife in the United States, which is where we are, or something like international conservation, things are done through a combination of money and manpower, right? And so realistically, like in the US, in our model, you know, politicians don't pass laws or care about things unless people tell them to. And that's where knowledge is power. And the more we work together, the more, like, there is power in numbers, there is power in knowledge. And so for me, I feel like listening to these conversations, following scientists on Twitter, giving young people the opportunity to have exposure with people like you and me is really important, because dollars matter, knowledge matters, and exposure matters. And so, like, to take it a step further, supporting an organization like Skype a Scientist or supporting interactions like this are really important, because we're making sure the next generation has the exposure needed to do the work that my generation or our generation can't do, right? And so then to take it even a step further, it's a matter of being engaged in the political process, which, oh my gosh, if you had asked me that when I was 25, I'd be like, oh, you know, snooze, I'm not interested in that. Okay, fine. Dollars matter. Supporting companies that, you know, don't produce palm oil, buying shade grown coffee, you know, reducing the amount of meat that you consume, or maybe not having as much dairy products. You know, you don't have to completely change your life to have an impact. It's just doing a couple of small things different and talking to other people who are like-minded that will really generate change in our world, because conservation does take all sorts of people. It doesn't just take people like me who do field work or lab work. It doesn't just take people like you who are up close and personal in the zoo world and working on ex situ and in situ conservation. It takes people communicating, and that obviously requires, it's more than a lecture, it's a conversation.
Absolutely. 2 thumbs up. I love it. That's a good answer, and thank you. Before I say thank you and see you later, where can people find you? Obviously, if we're watching right now on Instagram, follow you here, but where else can they find you if they prefer other platforms, or do you have a website or anything else you want to let people know where to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously Biologist Imogene here on Instagram. I'm Biologist Immo on Twitter because they didn't allow enough characters for my full name. But you can find all kinds of information on my website, which is biologistimogene.com. I have a Facebook, but I'm just not very active on it. But if you Biologist Imogene is where I have all types of information about like my current research on snow leopards, past carnivore work, as well as resources for students who are interested in the field.
Is that website linked in your bio?
It is, yep. Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. That makes it easier too, so people don't have to try and memorize that. So if you haven't already started following her, please do. If you follow me, here's a new person for you to follow. Check out her website. I've been kind of following you both on Twitter and Instagram for a while now, and I think your work is fascinating. So again, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join me for our fun little, most memorable animal encounter story time. And those were two great stories. So thank you.
Awesome. No, thanks, Rich, for having me. I appreciate it. I definitely think that once all this is over, we'll have to put it on the to-do list to do some type of cool, like carnivore conservation, science communication.
I think so. All right. Well, thanks again. And I'll stay on just a little bit longer, but I'll say goodbye to you. So again, I hope you stay well through all this and hope your research picks back up soon.
Thanks. We'll talk soon. I'll see you online.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Well, that was pretty awesome. I kind of had an idea that it would be a snow leopard story, but the rhino story was pretty awesome too. I can relate to that, kind of having been there myself. So what an awesome opportunity to have her on for this little segment of story time with everybody. I'm going to keep my exit here short because we're already at about 30 some minutes. I just want to say thank you to everybody for taking the time out of your day to join us. And also I appreciate the comments and everything. What I have learned once this live is over though, and it goes to Instagram TV, all the comments that we're streaming in here and questions, I always assume, I'll go back to them and see them, but they disappear. They're not part of the video that's saved to Instagram TV where all of my interviews live. So if you have posted a question that we didn't get to, because it is more of just an interview back and forth with them, feel free to leave it in the comments. In about an hour, I'll have this posted to IGTV. It will pop up in my Instagram page as well that it's been posted, and you can comment there and leave a question. If you tag Imogene in that question, I'm sure she'll respond there too. So without further ado, I hope you have a wonderful Friday. Today is Friday for what it's worth for those that are still working a Monday, Friday situation. And even if you're not, hey, embrace it, celebrate it for what it used to be when it was Friday, right? Either way, I think for some people too, it's weird. We're at that point in our calendar here in the US that this is a 3-day weekend coming up, but is it? I don't know. It's kind of a weird situation for all of us. So whatever the day may be for you, whatever the weekend may be for you or not, I hope you have a wonderful time. I hope you have an opportunity to share some information about animals you might have learned here or anywhere else. And yeah, we'll leave it at that. Have a good one, everybody.